So, Jose, can you remember what sparked your initial interest in filmmaking? Like, in particular, I guess the horror genre. Was there a specific film or directors or something like that that inspired you?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on, and I love that. Yeah, I'm sorry, you're Irish, yes?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, I love that. I have another friend in Ireland who says film, and I just love it. I love the
Everybody always brings
pronunciation.
that up because I'm like, sometimes I say movie and I'm like, movie doesn't sound genuine to like where I'm from. We always call it like it's like when you guys say movie theater and we say cinema. It's like
I get
I'm
you.
going to the cinema.
That's great. I like that. It's more formal for you guys. That's fantastic. Uh, Well, for me, since I could remember, honestly, movies were a part of my life. I grew up as an only child. I had kind of a tumultuous childhood, so I found sanctuary in cinema and in particularly scary movies because I think at the time they were like, oh, don't watch scary movies, they'll mess you up. They're gonna traumatize you. You'll have nightmares. Blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, really? Wow, okay. So this is kind of like the devil's candy. You're telling me is what you're saying, and so you gravitate towards that stuff as a kid just because it's interesting and it's different. It's not like your daily life. So I think early on, I found a horror to be a safe place, I guess, a welcoming place, and it was a place full of outsiders and loners and people struggling against the world. To this day, I think that's why horror has such a that's why there's horror conventions and there's no comedy conventions, there's no drama conventions, there's no Lifetime channel conventions because those are boring day-to-day things. Horror connects with you on a spiritual level, on a gut level, and that's why horror fans surround themselves with scary shit because it's you feel a part of it, you feel welcomed by it, and it's a power over the darkness, which I think a lot of us are trying to look for in our daily life because life is so hard. It's if we can master that darkness in any way, then that makes us very special. So for me, early on, I think the first movie that really made an impact that was a horror movie was Jaws, and to this day, it's my number one favorite movie of all time. It's in contention with a lot of others, but in terms of horror, like straight great, fantastic cinema, Jaws has never been outpaced. And if you think about it, nowadays there's so many shark movies being made. At the time, it was such a novel concept that if that came out today, it probably wouldn't make a dent. But it was the right movie for the right time, and it traumatized me. I hate the ocean to this day, and even though I live in Los Angeles, I spend very little time at the beach. Also, because the beach sucks. There's just sand and it's dumb. But sharks. That movie taught me to stay away from the ocean and keep me safe, and I think that's ultimately um, what makes horror interesting is that it teaches people uh, to beware. Hey, there's a guy running at you with a knife. Don't stop and ask him for directions. Move. So yeah, that's sort of my early inclinations with horror was definitely learning the sharks are fucking scary.
I agree there. That was a movie to probably set me on a path to loving horror as well, but also still hate the ocean, hate the beach. Hate the beach anyway, but I definitely hate the beach with the idea of sharks. And funny actually, the city over from where I live has had like a huge amount of sightings of like 20 to 25-foot sharks in like the
Wow.
last couple of months, which is kind of weird considering it's off the southeast coast of Ireland. So now I definitely hate the beach.
Holy crap, dude! I mean, those are not to be messed with. That was Jaws. Jaws was 25 feet, so you do not want to mess with anything that size. No.
No. Would you say then for you, growing up and having this I guess fascination with film in general, do you think that kind of allowed for you to have a career in the industry? Was maybe the fact of like, I guess not being able to see yourself do anything else, like having such a passion for it that it's like I don't want to do any other job no matter what you give me. I don't want to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a difference, I think, when it comes to being a horror fan and then wanting to be a horror filmmaker. I mean, I think every horror fan, at least the ones that I've talked to, they have an idea for a script or they have an idea for a short film, and they're, and I think that's great because horror allows you to do that. You want to be a part of that in some way, but the actual work of putting in the time and the effort and the not knowing of the freelance work when it comes to being a horror filmmaker or a filmmaker in general is not sustainable for a lot of people. But I think for me, I early on I knew, oh man, this is great. This is real magic, and I want to be able to be a part of this magic. And at first, I wanted to be an actor, and I tried that for a little bit. But I also knew the writing and directing was what I was the most keen on, and the real power is in the writing and the directing, and leave the performances to the pretty people, and then just tell them what to do, and having that power, being able to create your own nightmares, sort of, and sort of say, was such a delicious concept that I couldn't shake it. And since I was a kid, I'm like, I want to be a part of this. I want to, whatever it takes. I'm gonna be making movies, and I think most filmmakers come to it fairly early on. Not to point fingers at anybody, or say, oh, if you didn't do this when you were a kid, you're not a real filmmaker. But I'm saying most of us discover this love really early on, and it's something we can't shake. It's like hardwired into us, like this is what we were made for. And it helps you for the tough times, because there's a lot of tough times, man. You don't end up making a movie every year. You're lucky if you do. You're lucky if you make a movie every 2 years. But even if you put 2 years of work into it, somebody may never see it. It'll sit on your shelf. It's frustration upon frustration, but that innate love that you cannot shake. That's really what keeps pushing filmmakers forward at the end of the day.
What would you say then is the most common misconception? Because I feel like it's a really attractive, and again, this is not a knock on, I guess, the audience or fans, but it seems like a really attractive thing to go, oh, I would love to be a horror director, or I would love to be a director or a writer in general. What would you say the biggest misconception about the life of an actual working creative is?
But that it's easy, that it's that it's glamorous. I mean, now when I was growing up in, like, I was born in '79, so the '80s. I'm an '80s kid, but it wasn't until the '90s, like, thanks to Full Moon, that we saw any real behind the scenes kind of concept. So we're like, how do you make a movie? Oh wow, oh okay, oh, you got to take that again, so they have to repeat that. Interesting. So most people think, oh, it'd be great to just be chased by a killer. Like, yeah, but then put yourself in that situation. It's 3 in the morning, you're freezing, you're covered in cold, sticky blood. There's no shower for another hour. You have to drive, to the hotel, which is far away. It's not fun. It's not pleasant, and it could be very tedious. It could be very heartbreaking. And I think the biggest misconception is that it's gonna be all fun and games, but then you're like, oh man, I gotta wake up at 5 a.m. Oh man, I gotta be in makeup for 3 hours. Oh man, what do you mean I can't pee in this costume? There's all these things that people don't really take into account. Or as a director, what do you mean we only have 30 minutes? All right, we're losing the sunlight. Okay, my 5 shots is one. I got to make it work in one. Okay, so I got the blocking changes. Make sure you stand over here. Okay, no, don't stand over there because we had to put a light there. And it's like a constant game of chess with the universe, and it's incredibly difficult and exhausting. But if you love it, you never work a day in your life, as they say.
And to kind of move across, I guess, to the written aspect, when you sit down to write a screenplay or a story or a script, what kind of like process do you use? Do you start with like I don't know, like a particular scene, a character, a concept? You know, is it something that you're sitting in a coffee shop and you see something, you're like, that's a story?
It's interesting. I think every writer comes at it from a different angle. Some people still use index cards, putting it up on a bulletin board. I've never done that. For me, that doesn't make sense because if you could move scenes around, then those scenes aren't important. For me, there has to be a very strong narrative drive. There has to be a reason the scene is happening. There has to be a reason I'm taking your time as an audience to show you this. So I approach my scripting very similarly. For example, if I've been given an assignment to write, I'm like, okay, well, what movie would I like to watch that's like this, that I can do with this budget and these limitations? Because that's a big thing. If you're writing for a budget, the last three movies I've made, I've had to write for very, very small budget. So I go, okay, well, I can't put it in helicopters. I can't put in exploding castles and shit. So I have to think about how do I do this, in very limited time, very limited money, but still tell you know, a, a, a satisfying story for myself that hopefully the audience will enjoy as well. So there's a lot of ins and outs that go into figuring out a movie. But in terms of ideas, it's either it just kind of comes to you, and it kind of comes to you as a piece like, oh man, I have this amazing idea and I want this to develop. Maybe I get a hint of a story, and then I go, okay, I'm just gonna let it marinate. And you just and I maybe I put down a log line, which is like a sentence saying, okay, a killer opens a donut shop. All right, I'll come back to it, and I'll let my mind kind of sit on it for a little bit. I don't like to rush it. Or sometimes it'll just come complete, like, oh, that's the movie, and it's hard to explain. It's hard to, if it's hard to put that into words because it sounds insane, but it's like the movie speaking to you. It's like it exists. It's just the weirdest thing, but it's the best way I can describe it. It's like the movie exists in a parallel universe, and you've just downloaded it. Oh, hey, that's great. And then you can lay it down. So I write really fast once those stories come. I can write a script in like a week. Uh, it comes to me, bam, it's out. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have to piece it out, especially if I'm writing for a company or if it's a work for hire. I have to play by their rules and their notes. There's one I'm developing right now that I'm hoping to make this year. That was one of those downloads from the universe kind of movies, and I'm like, oh, I've never seen anything like this. Oh my god, I really want to make this movie. And when you get those are very special. But writing is it's very personal. It's very lonely, but if you connect with the material, then it's that and production are my two favorite moments. Mainly because it's just you in the movie. No one else has seen it. It's you. You're the audience, and if you're tuned in, you can hear the actors talking. You can hear them. Oh, wow, that's a great line. It's like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Who said that? Was that, where did that come from? All that stuff it's just the magic of writing. It's really hard to describe it, but I don't normally just kind of, you know, wander around looking for stuff. I watch a lot of movies, so I soak up a lot, and I recommend that to any filmmaker. Watch everything. Watch good movies, watch bad movies, watch old movies, silent movies, everything. Soak it up. You never know what's going to connect with you or unlock something. My goal, and to this day I've been able to achieve it. I watch 1,000 movies a year, and usually new movies. So I try to absorb as much as I can, and I think that helps. I think that helps any creative just kind of see what's out there and not repeat it, or maybe do a different spin on something. Um, but the writing, I think, is much more fun than waking up at 5 in the morning and or staying out late in the cold. But I love working with actors too, so it's sort of a 50-50 there.
So I've been kind of, I guess, in the early days, like loosely following your journey since like I started to see you pop up um in Cool Duders videos and stuff like that from time to time, and I kind of started to follow you from there and like kind of offshot from those guys. Um, and like I've always found you to be quite like a I don't know how to explain, like, I don't want to say creative because that's obvious, but and I don't know, I don't know if you'll take this as like a compliment or a slight, but you know, I put people like Rob Zombie, for example, whether people love or hate Rob Zombie, when you see his movies, you see his vision. It's his version. You know, it was his version of Halloween, which I kind of respect a filmmaker that will make their movie.
Hmm.
So for you, then I guess, and obviously, it's not like I want to. It's not anything about out in studios or anything like that. But where do you feel like is the correct level, I guess, for you personally? Like, I mean, I can only imagine that the bigger the movie gets and the more money gets pumped into it and the bigger names and studios involved, there's a degree of like power taken away from the creative behind it in a way, you know, with the amount of notes and the amount of people who have their ideas of how it should be. So for you, I guess, where is the how do you navigate that without, like, let's say tomorrow you get contacted by Sony and they're like, okay, we want you to do this. You know, okay, right. And then as the process goes along, you realize that like you have just become the guy pushing the buttons on the keyboard, but somebody else is like in the background telling you, well, no, we don't really like that idea. No, this is garbage. Where's your cutoff point?
That's interesting. It's a good question. It's there's a lot of layers to it. I think if you're brought onto something, you mentioned Sony. Like if I would, gosh, this would be a monumental task though. If you were brought on to do something like the new Spider-Man movie, I mean, you have to understand you're not the guy. You're not the guy. You're not. Even if it was Rob Zombie's Spider-Man, I doubt they would let him do. You know, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
they would not let him do Devil's Rejects meet Spider-Man. So there's a lot of control when it comes to big, 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 big money, and I think a lot of directors kind of lose their flavor when it comes to things like that. I mean, look, I didn't see Multiverse of Madness, so I don't know how Raimi did, but I mean, he kicked the shit out of the Spider-Man movies, and but again, Raimi wasn't the star. We knew him as horror fans, but Spider-Man was the guy. But the fact that those movies look so unique and so different from the other ones is because of Raimi. So I think it behooves any filmmaker to not just be the button pusher, to not just point the camera. And it bugs me sometimes when I see movies like that. I'm like, so boring. Like they could have or they'll try a different shot, but sometimes it's not their fault because the script sucks. For example, most recently, Madam Web, terrible script,
Yeah.
but the movie's well directed. I mean, there's some really great shots in there. Stuff that probably took all fucking day to set up, like just one little thing, and it's there for 2 seconds, but it looks cool. Um, the directing is great, but the movie is let down because of the script. And then maybe the performances are lacking, maybe because the director didn't know exactly how to go with it. But whatever. Um, it's tough when you're dealing with a movie like that. When you're because again, you're not the guy. You are sort of the hired hand. For example, if it's a Peter Jackson who brought Lord of the Rings to New Line Cinema, goes, "Hey, I want to do this. This is a passion project." Then he's going to put his heart and soul into something like that. And then you get the rare exceptions of Guillermo del Toro doing Blade 2, and it's such a unique film. And he's certainly put himself above and beyond. Like this is gonna be as much above and beyond as I can make it. I'm gonna make it as unique as possible, and it certainly stands out for that. So that's always been my goal. The last few movies I've made, I have been through the Asylum, and I'll tell you right now, the budgets are very low. It's $100,000. They give me 6 days to shoot these movies. It's frustrating, and it's very, very difficult. I think, not to throw anybody into the bus, but I think most Asylum movies suffer because of that, because they don't have any time, any money. So it is just kind of static shots and people talking, and it just feels a little dull, and there's no flavor. So my goal, and I think I've earned a little leeway with them, is to inject as much energy and flavor and myself as I can into the movie. Obviously, I write them too, so I can, they have strict rules about dialogue. I tend to break those because I find I don't think that I don't think there necessarily should be hard and fast rules for dialogue. I
Hmm.
understand story structure. I am a big fan of story structure. You have to have beginning, middle, and end, or you're wasting people's time. Because there's a reason I'm asking you to sit down and watch this, right? There's a reason you're sitting down. This is a slice of life for a reason, not because, hey, watch me buy some milk at the store and take a bus ride. There's your movie. No, I don't. I'm not into those. I want to I want to be able to tell a story that's compelling and interesting, and people walk away. I'm not saying they're going to be changed or whatever, but at least they go, okay, I'm satisfied that I spent those 90 minutes taking a worthwhile ride. It wasn't waiting in line at a roller coaster for 2 hours and it was a 10-second ride. So I'm very cognizant of that fact. So I try to do as much Rob Zombieing as I can of the work that I've done. And I think every filmmaker should. But it is difficult. But if I ever get that Sony job, I'll come back on here and I'll let you know how that went.
Yeah, and the reason I asked the question is because I can, like, obviously from the outside looking in, I always feel for when I talk to people like yourself who it's clear, I think even just through the screen, like how passionate, versus it just being like, oh well, let me just make up the numbers and whatever, it's fine, I don't really care. And like I had a conversation with David Garcia, who ended up getting the job for that most recent Texas Chainsaw movie. And like there was, so originally there was two Irish directors who were shooting that movie out in Bulgaria or wherever it was, and they had some issues with the studio, so they were asked to leave. And he got brought in on like 5 6 days notice. But he said a similar thing. He was like, it was such a weird feeling because I went from doing like kind of independent movies to this franchise, and I had to just pick my battles because I knew in a way I was just the guy brought in to finish the movie. But then at the same time, I don't want to turn down the chance to direct Texas Chainsaw, but then it's also, I'm getting it in the right hand and then it's been taken away in the left hand, because then obviously a lot of people were like, oh, it was such a shitty movie. It was garbage. It was this, it was that. But he was like, they had such a rigid idea of what the story should be and what needed to be in it. And then especially when they fired a guy's last minute and he's brought in as a replacement, he's like, what do I do? I was like, this is what I wanted. But then, and I kind of feel for people then, because it's like you said, it can be quite a lonely thing. I think it's understated, like how difficult the life of a writer and director can really be. I know we see the finished product. Your movie comes out and everyone's like, oh, Jose, you're great. Everything is great. Woohoo, you live in LA. It's perfect. But everybody forgets like the 2 or 3 years where you spend every waking minute trying to like get this thing going.
Yeah, no. Excuse me. Yeah, it's tricky, man. Especially being brought in last minute. That must have been very, very difficult because you don't even have a chance to put your mind around it. I mean, I don't think I've never done a movie that I didn't write, direct. I mean, I don't know that I would like that, only because I want to feel very connected to the movie and very connected to the characters. I want them to feel alive to me, and when I watch audition tapes, I'm like, oh, that's the guy. That's the guy that I saw in my head. He's the guy. Get him. Um, you know, uh, I want to feel as connected to the movie as possible, and I think every filmmaker does. I can't imagine, you want to just. I mean, again, I'm not going to name names, but I know a couple people who are just kind of day player directors, in terms of they'll just come in, point the camera, okay, good, that's it, all right, goodbye everybody, and they don't even stay through post, they don't finish the movie or anything, which is like bonkers to me. You know what I mean? These are supposed to mean something to you. They're supposed to be your babies. So yeah, that's a very difficult situation that he must have been in, to even wrap his head around the concept, much less try to inject any of himself into it. Yeah, that's gosh, I mean, it's enviable and unenviable at the same time, because like, oh,
Yeah.
he gets to do a franchise movie. That's just pretty cool. He gets to be a part of the lore. But at the same time, the worst part is sometimes things are out of your hands. So when reviews come out, you feel eviscerated, like, but that's not what I meant. It's supposed to be this and da 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 da. That's why I don't watch reviews in general. I just kind of stay away. Like, hey, look, I made the movie. It's out in the world. I'm critical of movies myself, and so I think everybody should have the same right to their opinion. But I don't necessarily go out and look for what people's opinions are of my work.
That's probably a good thing in a way because there's so many people out there now who are like armchair experts. So I think it can be we live, and I think I don't know how you feel about this because I know you're a big physical media guy, and obviously streaming has become such a huge thing, and I feel like the more available movies have become in a way, and the more streaming, I mean, they dump hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies every month on these streaming platforms, and they seem to just get kind of lost in the ether. And I feel like we've become more of a like throwaway society. So it's like, you know, you
Mm.
spend a year, 2 years making a movie, it comes out on a streaming platform, and then people watch it for 5 minutes and go, "Oh, I don't like this. This is garbage," and then go on Letterboxd or wherever and just be like, "Oh, garbage, 1 star. I hated it," when they haven't actually even watched the movie. Whereas, like, I mean, I guess even back to like the 90s, you would go and rent a videotape and you would be committed to watching this movie, whether it was terrible or whatever. And I don't know, I think it allowed for a bit more like actually seeing it for what it is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think movie watching has changed in general. I mean, as here in I mean, I live in an industry town. LA's everything is all about movies and TV here. So here, people are worrying about movie theaters closing down because we've had two, three big movies open and they've underperformed. So I don't know if you saw Fall Guy, but I loved it. I thought it was a really fun movie. That thing bombed. So it's one of those things where nobody really knows what the audience really wants or what to expect. And a combination of streaming coming in and due to the pandemic, I think everything's changed in terms of how we view movies. I think people staying home, people realize, you know what, I think it I mean, and I honestly, I can't argue with the fact that it's more relaxing at home. You don't have people. I mean, here we have people on their phones. I took my son to see Sonic 2, and there was a lady sitting next to me the whole movie. She was on her phone the whole movie.
Yeah,
She
it's
never
the
looked up.
worst.
Right? What the hell? So it's like, and it's distracting to me. So like, I keep like, "God, what's she doing? Why is she not watching the movie?" And so it was bothering me. And then people talking loud, and I mean, it's become, for lack of a better reference, Escape from New York in the movie theaters,
Yeah.
and it's more fun at home. You could pause it to pee. Oh, let me go get some more popcorn or whatever. You don't have to worry about missing the movie. You don't have to worry about people talking. You could save money. Here, I don't know what the pricing is for you guys, but you could rent a new movie here for $20. And if the whole family watches it, I mean, that's a deal. We save a lot of money. Like, hey, we just watched Kung Fu Panda 4 here at home, and it was $20 for all of us. And they all enjoyed it to moderate degrees, but still it was cheap and you could pause it and get snacks, whatever. It's become easier. And I mean, my last movies have all gone to streaming and become part of that churn of the 100 movies coming out every month. The good thing about movies being easier to make now is that more people get to make movies. The bad news is there are more movies and audiences are more discerning. I think back in the day, 80s and 90s, you would watch whatever, right? I mean, you go to the video store, you'd be like, "Oh, look at this cover. Oh, there's a half a boob on that. I'm gonna check that out." You're like, "Oh, there's blood. The words are written in blood. We got to get this. This is gonna be amazing." You would just be drawn in, and then you would take it home and be like, "Oh, that was terrible." But whatever, $2, you give it back or whatever. Nowadays, because physical media has become much more expensive, you can't do you can't do the blind buys anymore. I mean, a lot of people still do, and but back in the day, I've never heard of this movie. $17. All right, I'll give it a try. But now with the prices creeping up, $30, $40, like, ugh, I don't know if I want to try that. And I think that's the difference between physical media now and renting back then. I think renting is a model that to me still makes sense, and the only place you can rent is on streaming. So absolutely, streaming is going to be the future. I think it is already. Um, And physical media sadly will become a very, very, very specialized collector's market, which it technically is already. I mean, there's some somebody online was commenting, "Oh my god, they still make DVDs? Like, what the hell are you talking about?" Yeah, that have you heard of 4K? I mean, what? There's a lot of people. You know, you and I are very different. You know, horror fans, older horror fans, we understand the concept of how special it is to own a movie. You know, because you could only rent it back then, and it was so special. If you wanted to see it again, you had to re-rent it. I think I rented Beverly Hills Cop 1 like 20 times before I was able to buy it. Love that movie. So having a chance to own it is such a special thing, having your own movie library. But now with prices going insane, it's driving consumers in a different direction. And I think the boutique Blu-ray market will be um um you know, I don't know how long it'll last, but I think streaming is here to stay. And I think movie theaters will become, sadly, more of a specialized thing for things like Dune or, you know, big event pictures where you have to see this on a big screen. But I think smaller movies are really taking a hit when it comes to theatrical because the audience just isn't there, and you know they'll wait for a more relaxing at-home screening.
You know, like as a physical media collector, that kind of scares the shit out of me. The idea that, like, you know, at what point does this basically disappear? Or like, you know, will it get to the stage where I won't even have the option to pay, like, you know, 40, $50 for a 4K limited edition media book, whatever it is. And then similar with, I guess, the experience of going to the movies, that, like, you know, does the price just hike up really high so they can try and, like, make back the money when they do release these movies? You know, I and it kind of worries me, like, where's the cutoff point? What happens? Um, and I suppose for you then that's probably a double-edged sword, is it? In the sense of, from the filmmaker aspect, and then to, like, I guess just as a fan, it's like that weird position to be in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think this affects everybody when it comes to audience tastes and where the audience is. I mean, if indie horror was thriving in theaters, then you would see more of it, and it'd be easier to get money. I mean, that's the number one hurdle for anything movie related is where's the money? Who's paying for this? Before you make it. And then the next hurdle is who's paying for it after. You know, the audience and who's going to distribute it. That's a whole other ball of wax. It's just as complicated. But luckily, horror and action are the two genres that will always perform better than average. Uh, which is great because you can make those. You don't have to spend, you know, $200 million to make Scream 7. You can spend, I don't know, 5, 10 million, maybe 15 million, and you'll absolutely make that back. You know, I think the Blumhouse model. I'm friends with James Wan. I was in the first Insidious very briefly. I'm one of the ghosts, but I don't think I even made the final cut. But you know, that movie was shot for $800,000. You know, and that was the birth of Blumhouse. So you know, now, you know, their movies are up and down in quality, obviously, but that happens just because you're putting out so much product and like, okay, I think people might like this, people might like that. But you know, there's still a market for those movies. Those movies, for the most part, I mean, I think for the most part they make their money back. I don't think there's been one that's been an outright flop because they don't spend a lot of money on those movies. I mean, I don't know what Imaginary made, but I'm pretty sure it made its money back. Or Night Swim, those two I didn't like, but I feel like they probably made their money back just because horror is still palpable for an audience, and that sometimes people like that communal experience of seeing it with an audience.
Mhm.
I'm of two minds on that. Honestly, I'd rather I've watched more movies by myself in the dark, which I prefer. So I kind of like watching movies by myself or with my family. Um, uh, but sometimes there's a good horror movie that you want to see with an audience and hear them gasp and react. So I think that's the benefit of a good theatrical experience. And so I don't think horror's going away anytime soon. But I think in terms of where it's distributed, how it's viewed, where the audiences are, that's stuff that It's being figured out daily. I don't think anybody really has an answer to that yet.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And just hearing you talk about like your preference of maybe watching movies at home on your own in the dark, I feel like that has definitely become my more preferred way to see a movie. But then at the same time, I don't know if it's the nostalgia in me that's clinging on to the idea of like the movie experience where it's like, oh, I'm going to see this movie, you know, at the movie theater or whatever. And then it's so weird because then I get there and I would imagine it's because a lot of these movies aren't really making that much money back. Like you said, outside of action and horror, a lot of these movies are not really. And I noticed, like even here and like even some towns over and like some of the cities around, I go to these places now and they seem kind of run down. Like nobody gives a shit anymore about like the quality or like how clean the place is or people adhering to rules of like you said, like, you can't be on your phone on Facebook for 2 hours. You cannot be having a full blown conversation inside the movie theater. Like it's just something you can't do. And it just seems like I don't know. It's like obviously the companies probably aren't making as much money as they were, so they're like, yeah, whatever, cut down on staff, cut down on everybody. Like our local movie theater, like I if I went there on like a Saturday night, they have like two people working, and one is a manager, and it's like
Wow.
so. Then if a crowd does show up, it's like mayhem, and like the place is just like filthy and destroyed, and everyone's just like animals, just doing whatever they want, and I'm like, this is just not. And like you said, I can rent it at home for 20 and like everybody can enjoy, or we can pay like 20 minimum per person without any kind of snacks. So
Yeah.
it's
The
it's crazy.
pricing, yeah, dude. I mean, I always try to get a snack or something because I know the movie theaters mainly make their money from the snacks, but yeah, I think upkeep is important, and I think we've had a lot of theaters here closed for renovations, and I think that's for the better. Because LA has to be, if anybody cares about movies and movie theaters, it has to be LA. And if they don't, then you can easily tell. I mean, there's some theaters out here that are sticky and gross. I'm like, okay, I'll never go back in there. Uh, there was a theater. It was a great theater. It still exists. It was called the New Beverly Cinema. Before it was bought out by Tarantino, who owns it currently. I think it used to be a porno theater back in the 70s. But when I moved out here, it was a revival house. So they would show just old movies. And I got to see a lot of great old movies there. They had a grindhouse night every Tuesday night, and they'd show like these, really great, just vintage 70 nonsense kind of movies. Johnny Firecloud and tons of kung fu stuff. Love it. But the theater was gross. I actually even got a staph infection from that theater. So
Wow.
yeah. So Tarantino came in, cleaned it out, changed the seats. It pretty much kept the same vibe, but it's definitely updated. It's now it's kind of a trendy hipster spot, so I don't go there as often, but they still have the same programming. And luckily, the manager is still the at least as far as I know, the guy who his father opened the theater, so it's still sort of in family hands, from what I remember. If that hasn't changed, it's been a while since I've been there, but yeah, if you want to have that premier theater experience, it's got to be clean, it's got to be taken care of. The one thing I've seen now that I don't like, I don't know if you guys have one out your way. It's called the oh, I'm blanking on the name of it. Alamo Draft House. Alamo
Yeah,
Draft
yeah,
House.
yeah.
So I don't like the fact that people can order fucking burgers in the middle of a movie, and then the waiter comes and blocks your view to deliver I hate that.
Mhm.
So I'm not. I like that they have like, oh, no, nobody on your phone. I'm like, okay, but I've got the usher's butt in my face delivering burger and fries to somebody next to me, and like that's more distracting than somebody, whatever, checking a text. So not a
Yeah,
fan. Where do you stand on that? About those kind
yeah.
of premiere things?
So I have family in New York, and like we would be back and forth multiple times a year for as long as I can remember now. And I remember being younger, the idea of something like that seemed like a novelty because at the time we had nothing like that here. So it was like, whoa, you can go to the movies and like get a beer and get like a hot dog, and whoa, that's so cool. That's so different. And then like over time and as I got older and stuff, and then I get there, like I had this really strange experience a couple of years ago. There was like some woman sitting behind me, and I actually think that it was really strange. They were showing, I think it was like 2009, The Collector, and that wasn't screening at all in Ireland or the UK or anywhere. So like I had been in the States at the time. This was the only chance I was going to get to see it on a big screen. Just love the concept of it. I get there and like, we're sitting, we have popcorn and a drink or whatever. And like this woman behind me is like coming in with like fucking trays of like nachos with like cheese on them and like hot dogs and shit with like ketchup. And she's like behind us, but like one seat over, so it's not directly behind us. She's like spilling all this like cheese and sauce all over, like down the seats and like on the ground. She's like, "Oh, can you go get me some napkins and stuff?" I'm like, "I got all this shit all over me. Can you like go?" And I'm like, "This is in the middle of a movie. Like, what is the
Jesus.
purpose of this? Like, I don't understand why we're having like a full like 3-course meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we not be okay with just like, popcorn and some snacks and maybe leave it? It's just such a weird, I found it such a weird concept. Maybe on paper, it seemed like, oh, this is like a really cool, like unique, great thing. But I don't know. For me personally, not a huge fan.
Nah, man. And then like the smells get everywhere, and it's like, oh, it smells like onions. I'm just trying to watch this fucking movie, and
Yeah.
it just smells like I'm in a kitchen.
Yep. Yeah, it's a strange thing. Do you have any like existing IP or character or anything like that that if you got the chance to would be like the one that sticks out? And this will kind of tie into a question I'm going to ask after this because obviously your newest movie, Monster Mash, is kind of that to a degree. But is there another character out there? Like I would imagine most people always throw things out like Freddy, Jason, things like that. Is there any character like that that is at the top of your list?
Well, actually, there's two, but if I had to pick one, absolutely Ghostface. I'm a massive Scream fan.
Right. Yes.
I
Like it.
love it. I was there opening night for the first one,
I know.
and blew me away. I watched it twice in a row that night. I'm like, holy crap, this is special. So I would kill for the chance. I mean, I totally would have taken on, even with all the baggage that Scream 7 is facing right now. I would have taken that shit on just for the chance to be able to have any kind of association with it. Yeah, I would love to do a Scream movie one day. Who knows? Who knows where the franchise is going? But I'm glad that it's in Kevin's hands, and I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, that would be. I'm another huge fan. I have Ghostface here. I have Stab Film Crew
Oh,
tattoo
nice.
here. I even actually have a 1996 Fun World, an original Ghostface mask. Funny, right? Because as a collector of stuff, I would try and buy stuff from back then. And this
Hmm.
was something we had like just like in like a wardrobe or something. It was just like thrown there, still with the labels and stuff. And I was like,
No
holy
way.
shit. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, and it still smells like vanilla or whatever that smell they put on the mask.
Uh huh. That's
Which is weird.
amazing.
So Ghostface would be your number one, yeah?
Yeah. No, number two would be Chucky. I'm a huge Chucky fan.
Nice.
I love, that was one of the horror movies in my childhood that really stuck with me, and not necessarily because I thought, I didn't really have, dolls or plushies growing up, but not that I was afraid that they would come to life, but I just really liked the concept of a kid hero. Alex Vincent, his Andy Barkley. He was our Ripley in a sense. You know what I mean? Like he went after. He was the hero fighting this Dawn. I think that was cool. We never really. I mean, Monster Squad got close to it, but in terms of like a little kid hero, I think that was really powerful stuff. So the franchise has taken some weird turns, but I'm a big Chucky fan. I'd love to be a part of that somehow.
Obviously, like I know you have a lot of your own stuff going on, so you probably have very little time as is, but is that something that you ever like, have you ever come up with maybe your own take on what a Chucky or a Ghostface version of a movie or TV show might look like?
Absolutely. Well, in terms of Chucky, not so much because the story changes so often. I had a good concept for something before we got Cult of Chucky, and then I'm like, all right, throw everything out the window. This just completely changes everything. But for Scream, absolutely. I had a really great trilogy in mind where the first one is a cliffhanger where you think you've solved it, but you didn't, and then it's very much an Empire Strikes Back middle where things go, the tables are turned and the killer's revealed and we're following the killer, but then there's another one and then that leads into the third one. So there's a lot of I wanted to sort of play with the convention where you weren't just getting teenagers getting killed, then the unmasking, and then movie over. It would be something a little more unique. And I was kind of hoping when they announced this Strangers trilogy that they would do something like that. And I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of the first chapter. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but
I
it's
did, yeah. Yeah.
they just copied the first movie. What the hell? Like, why would you
That's
do that?
I've said this to so many people, and it's like I love the original. It feels weird saying the original considering it only came out in 2008. It doesn't really feel like
Yeah.
that long ago. Um, but yeah, it was like it's strange because like there was shots in it and stuff, and some of it was beautifully shot and lit and things like that, and I liked it. But I was just like, this is just like the same, but not as good as the first one. And like it feels like you've only made this just to try and get me interested to go, oh, what happens next? It's like, was there no way for them to maybe just bring us to that section of the story and then go from there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they have a trilogy in mind, I'm hoping. I mean, they've all shot. I think they shot it back to back. I mean, Rennie Harlin's a great director, so I obviously it looks good. But story wise, I'm like, man, don't just repeat almost the every beat from the original movie. My kids liked it, but I felt a little underwhelmed. And yes, it sort of ends in a cliffhanger, but I don't know. It feels like they could have done so much more with the like maybe who the hell's Tamara? Maybe start with that. I thought it would have been more of an a
Yeah.
origin story, but it was just I feel like you just fucking threw it away, man. It is pointless.
Yeah, it's just it was just I came out of it going like that was such a I had heard people saying, "Oh, it's basically just the same movie again except worse." And I was like, "Nah, there's got to be something like really unique about it because like they wouldn't just make it again, right?" I was like, especially it's not even 20 years yet. And I was like, wow, they kind of just done the same thing again. And I already, like you said, if you've seen the other one, you kind of already know all the beats and all the like, ah, okay, that's the thing with the door, and oh yeah, that's the thing where they go outside, and like, yeah, okay, whatever. It just seemed really weird. Like maybe if you had no concept of what the strangers was, you might be like, oh, it was okay.
Yeah, and I think most people, I mean, not to discredit people who enjoyed it, but I think most people probably didn't know the original and were just like, "Oh yeah, it was scary or whatever." That's fine. There's an audience for that. I'm not saying everybody should go see the first one. I mean, you should. I'm a bigger fan of the second one. I think Pray at Night is pretty damn badass. Uh, and I wish we gotten something more like that, more instead of like just suspenseful creaks and groans of the house. I'm like, okay, I'm getting bored now. Especially as a fan, I'm 3 movies in now. Let's go, baby. I don't want to wait
Yeah.
around. I know what to expect. Just give it to me already.
Um, going back to your work again, and I guess this probably ties in as well. How do you feel about like I remember you mentioned Pray at Night. I remember when that came out, there was a lot of people and like a lot of the fans and stuff on Reddit and things like that. And again, I know you can take a lot of that stuff with a with a grain of salt, but a lot of people were like, "Oh, terrible, garbage, so dumb." And like now, all of a sudden, I see nothing but love for that movie. And I feel like this happens a lot where movies come out and they either just don't make any impact or people seem to just shit on them instantly. And then, like, 5, 6, 7 years later, people are like, "Oh my god, it's one of my favorite movies. I've watched it so many times. Now I get it." Do you find that happens more often now? And how do you feel about that? Or is that something that maybe you experience with some of your movies? Like the names start to crop up more and more and more. And maybe at the time it didn't hit like you expected, or maybe people were like, "Oh, I don't like that because of this, that, and the other." And then it becomes almost cult.
Hmm. Yeah. I think people are more reactionary now. I think when we were growing up, I mean, movies were just so special. Like, oh my god, oh, this looks great. Let's go see that. You maybe didn't love it, or or you thought it was the most amazing thing, but there wasn't that community of like connecting with other horror fans online or whatever. Um, where you could instantly share your reaction and then have someone say, "Oh, I agree," or "No, you're wrong. It was terrible. It was great." So people become more reactionary, I think, by default because of social media, and I think being able to just instantly judge a movie has sort of become a move, a just a response of the culture. I think as a filmmaker, I've had to accept that. I mean, I think you just have to be aware that maybe down the line someone will come back and revisit your work and give it another reappraisal. I mean, I think as I still remember when I hated Halloween 3. I'm like, what the hell is this? What kind of crap is this? Masks? And now I'm one of the people who go, you know what? It stands on its own. It's a really unique movie, and I enjoy it for what it is. I still don't think it's amazing, but I like it for what it is. And I think maybe Pray at Night. I loved it when it first came out, and then it started getting hate. I'm like, what are people talking about? It's really great. I I'm even in the camp where I think it's better than the first one because it's just really suspenseful and it really goes
Mhm.
for broke, and it's just I don't know. It was really exciting. I like that director a lot too, Johannes Roberts. I think he's great. But yeah, at the time people were shitting on it, and now yeah, you're right. Everyone's like, oh, that one's so great. So I don't know. And I wonder, I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon, but maybe 10, 20 years, if people are gonna go back and say Halloween Ends is the best Michael Myers movie. I don't know.
It could happen.
It could happen. I'm not gonna be in that camp. I don't ever see myself saying Corey Cunningham is the Michael Myers, but I think reappraisal is a good thing in art. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sometimes I've recently the movie I loved as a kid, I rewatched it and I hated it, and that was Sidekicks. I grew up on that movie, love it. Chuck Norris,
Mhm.
Jonathan Brandis, rest in peace. Um, but rewatching, I'm like, man, this is not as good as I remember it. It's just it didn't hold up. There was a lot of elements I was not a big fan of. I mean, I think it's still kind of a fun movie, but it didn't it fell from its high status as one of the great kid movies for me. Um, so that can happen both ways, and I think that's just kind of the nature of art and the nature of appreciation. And um, you mature as you watch a movie when you're a kid, like, oh, that shit sucked, that was boring. You watch it when you're 30, you're like, oh man, I didn't notice how deep this was. That's interesting, and then you embrace it in a different way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think it does hurt careers going forward. For example, Monster Squad, one of my favorite movies of all time. I must have seen it, hundreds of times,
Yeah.
and it tanked. It didn't make any money. It was a complete failure to box office. It killed Fred Decker's career. And to this day, he has sort of. I mean, I think he still has a love for it because he knows what it means to people now. But I'm pretty sure he had kind of. Again, I don't want to read things into it, but he had kind of mixed feelings about it because it was something obviously he loved, and he put his energy and his best foot forward to make an amazing movie for the fans, and it underperformed. But if it had had the fandom that it has now when it came out, who knows where he would be? You know what I mean? He would be probably the next
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. It's strange how like there's such a dynamic there. I guess You mentioned about like sidekicks and stuff like that, and movies you grew up on and things, and I have a couple of more questions before I let you go, and one of them um kind of revolves around, I can't help but feel I watch some of these even 90s movies. Let me think. Adam's Family, The Witches, things like that that I would have considered at the time, like kid movies, I guess. And now I look at some of the movies that come out for kids and I'm like, what, like, what's changed there? Like, even like I've watched someone like the Adam's Family Values, and like there's a lot of like things where now I watch it and I'm like, huh, you would never, ever, ever even dream of attempting to make a movie like that and market it for kids ever.
Hmm.
Like, what do you
Yeah.
think that changes there in like the culture of like, because it's not that long ago, really, but like we're so far away from something like that. I couldn't ever see, like a big studio wanting to green light some of that dialogue and some of the story and stuff.
No, I mean, back then, I feel when is a time when we really got good cinema for children, where it was almost inappropriate in a sense, where it's like, wow, I can't believe they got away with that in the '80s. You had stuff like, again, I'll go back to Monster Squad or Goonies, where kids are talking about, sex and violence, and it wasn't so sanitized. I think, you know, to put a face on it, I would say things got Disneyfied and sanitized nowadays, and so you don't get any live action kid movies anymore. They're all animated, which is shocking to me because I think, all those live action kid movies from the '80s, I think still good, are for the most part still good and still rewatchable. But now we just get, animated sequel after animated sequel. Oh yeah, well, it makes money. Okay, yeah, sure. They always have to put their business hat on. But we don't have a Goonies. We don't have any kind of movie like that that can be pointed in the direct. I mean, I guess Stranger Things, but that's a TV show. But that's the closest thing that comes to being, having something of that ilk,
And it's weird
for
because that was
audiences.
such a huge hit that you would think that at some point, like at what point do the studios or these business heads go, huh, you know what, we might actually be onto something. People seem to want that like 80s, early 90s vibe back where it's a little bit more, like you said, I remember watching stuff before and some of it probably would have went over my head. But I don't know,
Mm.
like if my parents or grandparents who were watching as well at the time, there was kind of stuff in it for them where they'd be kind of like, uh-huh, but the kids are like, oh, well, it's just completely gone over my head. I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that I think that time has passed, and it is weird that we haven't gotten more Stranger Thingsy kind of things. I mean, you see it, but you see it in the independent space. A lot of indie movies have sort of tried to mimic that, but you don't see that in the big screen entertainment. There was a movie that came out. I don't remember the year, but it was, gosh, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It was called Earth to Echo. Great
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
I love that movie, and it was very much a kids' '80s adventure movie, and it bombed. Not very many people went to see it, and it just kind of disappeared. And I think maybe if that had done like ET money, then I think we would have seen more movies like that. But unfortunately, I guess audiences' tastes have changed, and I think that's what they're searching for. They're searching for what's gonna bring in the most bang for their buck. And in the '80s, you get away with having some fun, but now things are more careful, more sanitized. I guess is the best way for it.
You mentioned earlier about attempting to watch like 1,000 movies a year or whatever, and predominantly new stuff. But do you have any I always call them like comfort movies that
Mm.
you would find yourself revisiting maybe once a year or once every couple of years? Is there anything like that pops out as in like, yeah, I do watch that more than I do others?
Uh, I mean, there's movies I watch more often than normal. I don't watch them every year, but I mean, It's a Wonderful Life. It's an incredible movie. I mean, it's right up there with Jaws as my favorite movie of all time. Um, Scream, obviously, I've watched the first one hundreds of times. Uh, the sequels to varying degrees in terms of how many times I've seen them, but I would say, yeah, on Jaws. Those three are probably the ones that I watch more often throughout the, I guess, throughout the day.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Something else that kind of fascinates me with, like, obviously, I don't want to get like super personal or anything, but you've got a family and stuff like that.
Hmm.
How difficult is it for you to juggle, I guess, this creative space that you have, as in, um, and like, I find this personally, obviously at a way lesser level, but I find it hard sometimes to switch off from some of the like ideas or, and like a lot of your career is off the back of how much effort you put in, I guess. It's kind of all on
Hmm.
you to a degree, if you know what I mean. Like, I know
Hmm.
there's obviously other things at play, there's studios and backers and stuff like that, but how difficult is that, I guess, to juggle kids, a wife, the family thing, and then I guess not sitting at the dinner table being like, "Huh, yeah, that actually that scene, that dialogue, let me," and kind of maybe, you know, I guess playing two different characters like dad and husband versus filmmaker creative.
It's very hard. It's very difficult. And it's most people can go to work and then leave their work behind when they come home. That's work is over there. This is home. I work at home. This is I'm on my computer that I write on. So my work is here. My work is here. I think most creative people, we can't uh, officially detach from things like that because again, going to the sort of the metaphor of we live in different dimensions. Our we have our physical body here, and oh, I gotta drive my son to piano class. I gotta take my daughter to acting lessons. And then, oh right, but then, oh, so that's why. Okay, so that, okay, gotcha. Okay, so I gotta remember to write that down. And then you start making these little connections in your head, like, okay, so it's almost you're getting like a little the devil and angel, and they're whispering to you all the time. It's very difficult to find, especially to write. I feel it needs to be very much a church-like experience. You have to be by yourself, no distractions, and focus. Okay, now I'm gonna write, and then you just focus. But then, hey, can you make me lunch? Yeah, hold on. And then you gotta go make the lunch. So it's very hard because especially if you work from home. And right now I'm sort of the Mr. Mom because my wife is a full-time job as a school teacher and she's killing it. The students are ridiculous, but she's doing her best and she's working really hard. So I'm picking up the kids from school and doing the grocery shopping and the laundry and dishes and all that stuff. So to find time to make a movie is tricky, and it's very hard, but I mean, it's like anything, I guess. It's your job, and you have to focus on it, and you have to make time for it. And if I can't read today, I'll have to put that time aside so I can write. Or I can't watch my two movies today. All right, I'll have to. I now I have that time freed up so I can concentrate on writing. You make it work as best you can, but it's not an easy thing at all.
Do you have any practices or, I don't want to call them rituals, but like anything, I guess, that helps you with that? Like, I find, and like I said again, I can only imagine like this is at a way lower, probably way more chilled out level for me. But do you have anything? Because I'm sure there's lots of people either aspiring or maybe people who are making their own movies now and stuff like that. And I always get questions from people who listen to the show about struggling with relationships and friendships and girlfriends or boyfriends or husbands or wives or kids, and maybe they're getting frustrated and they don't know
Mhm.
what to do. Do you have anything that, like, because I find sometimes it's very hard to let go of that. Like, I have an early 10-year-old son, and kind of like you said as well, there's times where I'm like trying to do something and then I kind of play the Mr. Mom thing as well. So it's like, I know that that's what I'm here for, and it's not anything against that. But like you said, you get the call, oh, can you make me a sandwich? Can you? And I'm kind of starting to get frustrated. I'm like, I need to bring myself back down to art. Do you have any like I guess practices or anything that you find helps you
Mm.
in like structuring, or is it just a case of being able to, I don't know, improvise and adapt?
I mean, I think it's good practice for filmmaking. Being able to improvise and adapt. I think that's something you should get used to. Be able to, make decisions on the fly. Be able to have a game plan, but know that it's on a chalkboard and it could be erased by accident. All of a sudden we gotta rethink this. Oh, we've got his tuxedo for this scene. Oh no, he spilled chili on it. Oh crap. Okay, so just shoot him from the back. We won't see the front. Let's try to dry clean the shirt. You have to be able to, figure all that out really quickly. So, in a way, you're always training as a creative. If you see it that way, then you can kind of not see it so much as a burden. And I think sort of the issue is sometimes we see it as a burden, but it's a wonderful thing to be a father. It's a wonderful thing, to have a loving relationship and things like that. So and also you have to have an understanding partner, who will understand. Okay, I've got to go pretend over here in this corner. Give me 2 hours. Okay, you got it. Come on, let's leave the house, kids. You do need that. You do need your partner to be on your side. But then of course you have to bring up your slack too, because if you're just selfish, then that's when you run into problems. But in terms of rituals, I think, not necessarily rituals. I would say I think meditation is a good practice for everybody, just to close your eyes and breathe for 5 minutes. If you're anything like me, you won't be able to stop thinking about 1,000 things, but that's okay. Take your time to just stop, and I think that'll help kind of reset your energy. But in terms, the only ritual that I have, and it's when I'm getting ready to make a movie, is when I go to the first production meeting, or the first day on set. I play "Ecstasy of Gold" by Ennio Morricone from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think it's my favorite piece of movie music, and it just hypes me up. That's my only ritual when it comes to filmmaking. But when it comes to being a parent, you just gotta you just gotta be ready and do your best to make sure that understand your job is this, and it's not exactly what you want to do at the moment, but you made these things. You gotta take care of them.
Yeah, that's true. I always get that question. People always send me that question to ask different people to get different perspectives on, like, because I think from the outside it seems, like you mentioned earlier, it all seems so glamorous and easy. And it's like, oh, I don't have to like do laundry or like take care of the kids or like clean up stuff, or everything is great. I live
Mm.
in LA and I make movies. It's perfect. We live in a fantasy land. And for a lot of people that are far removed, it seems like that. So it's like, how can I not juggle these things? And it's like, there's a lot of people that are also juggling all that stuff and more, and they're
Yeah,
still
I
just gonna
mean,
make it work.
absolutely. I mean, that's why you hear of all these, like, high profile people having personal assistants, because somebody's got to, it sucks, but somebody's got to do the busy work if you want to focus on meeting after meeting on Hollywood projects. You got to have somebody making doctor appointments for you. You got to have somebody picking up the kids from school. You gotta, maybe they have a maid, and you're gonna have somebody who's gonna have dinner ready. And so the reason that happens is because that the work life balance isn't maybe 100% there, but it's hard for a creative, uh you know uh to be able to juggle all that, because it is such a, there's no stopping point really. I got one of my movies was sort of greenlit like 1 in the morning, and that was just like at a party when this guy said, yeah, let's make that. you know um so it's never like, okay, 5 p.m., all right, everybody, the office is closed, go home and have dinner with your kids, watch The Simpsons or whatever, and go to bed. It's very much a constant. And right now, I'm still thinking like, all right, I got to send in the list of actor names that I'm interested in for this movie, and so there's always it's always a kind of juggling act, and it doesn't get any easier. But it's people in Hollywood, it's like we're like everybody else. It's just um, I think our jobs are more visible than like the guy who changes tires or the school teacher or whatever. But everybody works hard. It's just different outcomes, I guess.
Yeah. Um. Okay. I'm conscious of your time now, so I'll we'll cut it back here now in a second. But
It's all good.
s-
It's all good.
speaking of that, you said like, I need to send this thing with the list of actors and this and that. What does like, I guess in layman's terms, like in the most basic version, what do your days look like currently? Maybe to give people a little bit of a look behind the scenes of what it's actually like.
Well, right now I've given myself a hiatus after finishing Monster Mash, which was probably the most difficult thing I've had to make for many reasons. I needed a big break, so I'm taking some me time. We're coming towards the end of the year of school, so I'm sort of doing the final housekeeping things here as we finish the school year and get into summer. But I'm ramping up early pre-production on a movie that I wrote. I actually wrote it right after Monster Mash, and it came to me on the set. So like I said, it was one of those download movies. I'm like, oh, I love this idea. I'll tell you the name and I'll tell you what they're like, but I can't tell you anymore. Right now, it's titled "Devil in the Details," and it's Michael Mann's Heat meets Hellraiser. That's all I'm gonna say.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really damn cool, and like I came at it as like a horror fan, I'm like, oh man, this is really unique. I've never seen anything like that. And those ideas excite me. So I right now we're in the process of raising money. I've got a casting director, and she wants me to put together a list of names for these two roles of people that I'd like to see. And then our goal is to go out to these people and ask for letters of intent, which means, yes, I like the script. I want to be in it. Once the movie gets funded, just basically saying, yeah, I'm in, but it depends on, the funding or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we take these letters to a production company saying, hey, we got this movie. This is who wants to be in it. Are you interested in producing this? And then they say yes. They give us they give us a number amount, like, okay, yeah, this if yeah, make this movie, we'll probably give you like, I don't know, $1 million or whatever. And then we would take that to a bank and say, hey, we're gonna get $1 million for this. And then they would give us the money, then we would go make the movie. And hopefully we can do that this year. But right now I'm in the casting phase of like figuring out my wish list of people that I'd like to see in it.
Is that a skill in itself, the pitching aspect of going to like a production company and being like, I would imagine if you're not passionate about your projects or whatever, if you're just like punching the numbers and going, you know what, actually it sounds like a good idea to be like a writer director, let me like do that and like try and jump in there. I feel like that you would probably be outed pretty quick once you get into like a pitch meeting where people be like, you don't really believe in this shit.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't consider myself a really good pitcher. I mean, there's some people who like practice and they have a little like 5 minute pitch. Hey guys, it's just like this, and they have little billboards and little posters and things. I've never had to do it at that level. But I've pitched movies to studios before, but I'm not a good pitcher because I feel like as much as I love storytelling, it's hard for me to um maybe I'm more aware of the person's time and the person's reception, so I don't necessarily spend like 5 minutes and then the guy does this and then we find out that his grandma is a ghost, which by the way is the plot of my next movie. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, but and so I'm personally bad with pitching. I think it's more I believe in the script. I'll say stuff like it's Hellraiser meets Heat. I say these are the people that are attached. I guarantee you there is nothing like this. Those things I think are easier to pull off than to go into a whole pitch. And then, the kids 16 to 22 will really enjoy it because blah blah blah. And then, the 40-year-olds will like it because blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to be necessarily be good at pitching, but you just really have to believe that what you're trying to make will genuinely be a good movie. And then fingers crossed, everyone else will go with you.
Is that how important are things like I don't know, like a social media presence, or I guess, for want of a better word, like putting yourself out there in the sense of, like, I don't know, being at events or being at parties and things like that, and having conversations where maybe you're just chatting with somebody and it's like, oh, hey, you're actually the guy that's like the VP for something, and then they're interested. Is that an important aspect of like the business?
Yeah, networking is very important. I mean, I think that's the advice that most people will give you, is that networking is very much a key function, especially as an actor. You want to get out, you want people to see your face, and I have major social anxiety, so I have trouble with parties and connecting with people. So I have, I'm not great at networking, but if I'm in an event and I'm introduced to somebody, then oh, hey, nice to meet you, and then we can talk and we can have a really good conversation. But I'm not the schmoozer, going around, hey, shaking hands, hey, what do you do? Oh, great, it was nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? I'm not that guy. There's some people that are that guy, but then they develop a reputation like, oh, geez, he's coming over. Just turn around, pretend you didn't see him. And I never want to be that guy. So I'm very much the shy wallflower person that if I know somebody very well, I'll walk over and say hello. But networking in general, I think, is important. And I think that's how most connections meet. And what I would suggest, anybody, the most social I'm ever is on a movie set and making a movie. I want to I want to know everybody's name. I want to make sure I shake everybody's hand. Good morning. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Everything, because you're the captain, and the captain sets the pace. And if the captain's an asshole, then everyone's going to hate you, and the movies are going to be unpleasant. But if the captain's having fun and the captain cares about your work, then everybody feels like, oh, cool, oh, wow. Some people, I was talking to a crew guy, a gaffer, who said, like, yeah, the last thing I worked on, the director didn't even know my name. And some actors have the same issue. The director doesn't even know my name. He just say, hey, you stand there. I don't understand that. I don't know how that how you work that way. But I would suggest somebody who's maybe having anxiety or issues with networking, be a PA, production assistant on a movie. That's low man on the totem pole, but you will know everybody, and everybody will know you, because it's an important job. You're the gopher for the most part, but you'll get to interact with the celebrities. You get to interact with the director, with the crew people. Everybody will know you to some degree, and it's a good way to meet people. It's a good way to get hired on some. Hey, I'm doing a show after this. Would you be interested in helping out? Yeah, sure. That's how most jobs happen, just word of mouth. Like, hey, I know a guy who knows a guy. And so, yeah, it's easy if you do it that way. You don't necessarily have to go to Hollywood parties or whatever. But absolutely, getting yourself out there. Not so much social media now. I think maybe studios like that. Like, if what's her face? Sydney Sweeney's got like 2 million
Yeah.
subscribers. Then okay, let's hire her. You know what I mean? By the way, I know Sydney. I interviewed her a long time ago. One of her first horror movies, and she was very nice. So I'm glad. I'm looking forward to seeing where she goes. I'm happy for her success. I think she's doing great.
Um, Looking back on everything you've done so far, then at this point in time, like, what impact do you hope to have on audiences, or is there a particular message or anything like that that you would like fans of your work to take away? Like, is there a, without coming across sounding cringy, like, there's definitely an aspect of legacy. I feel like there's things that are being created there, and art that's being created that can mean many different things to many people. It may dig them out of a deep depression, alcoholism. Like there's a lot of stuff like that where I feel like movies connect with people in different ways. And long after both of us are gone, this stuff will still exist in some format.
Absolutely. I think I think I'm very cognizant of things like that, and I think back to stuff like It's a Wonderful Life, a movie which itself was a bomb. It didn't do well in theaters, and now it's got this incredible fandom. It's a movie that will literally never die. Every year it will have a new audience. So I'm very cognizant of legacy, or not so much legacy, but in terms of like trying to say something, or leave a message behind. And I think in all of my movies, I have one character always say, "Nothing worth doing is easy," and I think it's in pretty much all of them. And I think that's sort of what I think I want. If anything, people to take away, nothing worth doing in life is easy. Because everything is hard, and sometimes the world is against you, time, money, whatever. But it's important to not give up. I think I, I have not necessarily put this in a movie, but I think maybe metaphorically, you're here for a reason. And I always say a movie is, there's a reason for this movie to exist. This time, there's a reason you're watching this, because this happens and this is interesting. Um, uh, so I think the reason this movie's here, there's a reason for its existence. It's entertainment. So I think we all have a reason to be here. We were all made for something, and I think to turn your back on yourself is very sad. And so I think if anything, I'm hoping to remind people to not give up on themselves. And look, I've made peace with the fact that at least so far, I'm not the next Spielberg. I'm not the next John Carpenter. Um, but I'm the first me, and I'm doing the best I can, and I'm making movies that I hope people will find entertaining. And I think I think if you keep striving to be something more than you are, and not give up on yourself, and I think that's a crucial ingredient to being a human. And I think the reason we're here is to uh, you know uh, do something, and maybe it's as small as you save somebody's life without knowing it, and you may never ever know what it is you do. You know what I mean? Or you made somebody smile who's having a bad day, or you were there when a person really needed you, and if you weren't there, I mean, that's going back to It's a Wonderful Life. That's what it's all about, right? George Bailey is gone, and everything in town, basically went to shit. That's one person. I mean, it's an exaggerated version of that, but each man's life does touch, so, or woman's life touches people in ways you'll never know. And I think having a soapbox like a movie or a YouTube channel, and being able to connect with people, I think is a gift. And I think if you can, not so necessarily redeem the human condition, but if you can at least remind people to keep their chin up, I think that's always a positive thing.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like that yourself included, there's many people out there that are um doing work like you, and in that space, and sometimes I think maybe it's lost on you guys, the impact, I guess, because it's a case of, you're just there's a lot going on, and stuff like that. And I think like we've talked about, the invention of streaming and stuff is great in one way, but then things kind of
Mm,
get churned a lot, and it seems like, oh, well, that movie didn't really, all right, that on to the next thing, and that's over with. But I think that
yep.
there is a lot of people out there, and it's like you said, that's actually an interesting point I never really thought of. You may not ever know some of those stories or situations where, you don't know that, like, let's say Monster Mash, for example. um there may be people out there that that's their comfort movie, that's their escape, that's their whatever from the, and it while it might seem ridiculous in one sense, I suppose there's movies I would say now that I used at times in my life as like the escape, and I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure like that a lot of people would be like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, yeah, it's, and I don't know what it is. I don't know, just something connected with me. And then and I think with you, you seems like such a real person, if that makes sense. There's no facade behind like, oh, let's be this way or let's be that way. It's just, I
Mm,
think people respect that now, and especially in the last couple of years, I feel like people are really reverting back to like that raw, like real, genuine, you know, appreciate the little things. We're all here for a short time, and I definitely think even now that you've tied your YouTube in as well, there's definitely like a deeper level to that, if that makes sense. Like even the video, I watched the video of you and your son, I think, when you went to Walmart and you found The Exorcist and stuff. And I was
yeah.
like, it was such like a real moment. And like maybe to you it just seemed like, a quick video, we're just gonna make a thing, but it just seemed like such a real, I was like, wow, that's a pretty badass thing in a way. Like that's a dad with his child, and like there's my movie in Walmart in physical form. And like, in 10 years, like that might seem like to a 10-year-old kid, like, wait, what? You had discs in like a store? What? Doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. And it's like kind of like a piece of history, if that makes sense. It's a weird, I don't know if I explained that well, but yeah, there's definitely something to it, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and being a dad, I always make sure I instill in them some kind of messages every once in a while. Like, hey, I won't be here forever, but I want to make sure I'm pointing you in the right direction. And yeah, stuff like that. I mean, that's seeing your own movie in a store. That's going to become rarer and rarer these days, unfortunately. And going back to Monster Mash, that was a movie that very nearly put me in a lot of mental distress. It was very hard to make, but and I honestly thought that nobody would like it. It was like, I feel like I've let the characters down, because I love these monsters, and I wanted to honor them as best I could, and it was like, everything against me. I feel like I let them all down. And then I haven't gotten a lot of this, but a lot of my actors, specifically my Dracula, Ethan Daniel Corbett, he says he gets messages every day from people saying that they love the movie and that they've really connected with it. So I mean, that makes me happy that the monster kids out there have discovered it and are enjoying it, and it redeems it. It kind of puts me in that Fred Decker space where, like,
Yeah.
I'm glad people are appreciating it. Despite all the warts that I know are there, they may not see. They're definitely not going to see it like I see it, and um, I think that's kind of special about movies, because that's, again, going back to what I was saying. Like, I let the movie speak for itself. I don't look at reviews. I don't seek out opinions. If people connect with it, then that's great, and I'm happy that's happening with that one. But again, you never know. You just never know what's going to happen with something like that, because it's not like you're putting on a play, and if the audience isn't clapping, then you suck. So it's a weird business to be in, honestly, because your job is basically done. I mean, beyond promoting and things, your job is basically done when the movie's out, and then you kind of just like sit back and it's like, all right, let's see what it's like throwing a bomb. Someone's like, oh, let's see where it lands. Who knows? Well, bomb is a bad metaphor, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I 100% know what you mean. And I definitely feel like that Monster Mash is gonna be one of those movies that year on year is gonna gain that like momentum. And maybe that's not like, obviously as a writer and director, it would probably be in your best interest for it to just become like and take off. But I definitely feel like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's going to be like one of those sleeper hits. I can really see people connecting with it over time, if that makes sense, and it being one of those things that gets rediscovered or whatever year on year.
Wow, I hope so. I
Yeah,
hope
I
so.
really do feel that. Two final things before I let you go. Is it true? I don't know. I seen this. I don't know if it was on Reddit or somewhere, I think, that you are making a Puppet Master movie. Or you were in talks to make a Puppet Master movie?
I am
I don't know if
I'm
that's something you can
attached.
even talk about.
Yeah, no, it's been out. I'm attached to direct Puppet Master Furnace Leech Woman, which will focus on obviously Leech Woman. But our production date got pushed back by 2 years, so it should have been out already. I was supposed to film that before Exorcists, but the script is being worked on. The main issue was I didn't, I'm a Puppet Master fan. I grew up with Full Moon. For me, Full Moon is the studio that kind of like really made me decide to be specifically a filmmaker, not just an
Mhm,
actor. um uh so I it's a big deal for me to be a part of the Full Moon universe. And I didn't want to make a disappointing Puppet Master movie, and I felt the script wasn't ready. And I think that's the biggest issue. That was the biggest holdup. And I didn't want to make a movie that I know, like, I personally would not like this. And I wanted as much quality as possible for the Puppet Master fans and myself. So that was the holdup there, but it hopefully will eventually happen. Charlie's doing his noir something series now.
mhm.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm still very much interested in it, but it's been pushed back indefinitely.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, no, I had seen some people talking about it, and everyone was like, "Oh, Leech Woman, this better come out." And has this been shot already? And I couldn't really find out much more about it. I was like, "Wait, this dates back a while." And then I was like, "Has this been made, or is this like not a thing?" Um,
Yeah.
Final question then before I let you go. I have a million other questions I could ask, and I could sit here all day and just pick your brain. Um,
We'll do a part two.
Yes, I would love to do that maybe towards the end of the year. Maybe you'll have some more
Yeah.
stuff we can talk about. Final question then would be why horror and what does it mean to you personally?
Uh, you know, again, as a kid, I connected with it. It felt comfortable. It felt much more fun than I wasn't a big Disney kid. I didn't really watch a lot of the um Disney cartoons when I was a kid. Honestly, I
Mhm,
didn't even watch them until like my nephew was of age and he had them. I'm like, oh, let's watch these. But I grew up watching, luckily not having a lot of limits as to what I could watch. So they would let me watch Arachnophobia and, Chucky and Freddy and all the, oh man, the new Freddy's out. Let's go. So I was able to indulge, and it spoke to me, and I think most horror fans, I think that's why they're horror fans, because there's something about it that speaks to you. And I think maybe it is that embracing of the darkness and not being scared of I mean, we're all, I think, inherently scared of the dark, because who the hell knows what's there. Yes, it's probably your bed, but it could be an old lady with a knife. So there's always that fear. Yeah, and I think that feeds our love of seeing scary movies. Like, oh well, let's see what this guy brings to the table. Let's see, what this. I love this actor. Let's see how they play a psycho. Let's see them, whatever, fight a lizard or whatever. Stuff that is beyond the normal is just genuinely interesting and unique, and something that appeals to everybody. So for me, I think horror is like, as a filmmaker, that's the most fun stuff to make. Do I want to make a 2-hour movie about, people crying about divorce? There's nothing wrong with those movies, but I don't necessarily want to watch those, or certainly rewatch those. Kramer versus Kramer is a great ass movie, but I've seen Jaws, way more times.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, um, Marriage Story, great, but one and done, man. I think it's just genuinely more fun to make, and I think something you that's maybe not talked about as much, but the people who make horror movies are the nicest people ever. And not just talking about myself, but in general, like Doug Bradley, who was in my Exorcist movie. I mean, he's a fucking hell priest, but he's the nicest, most gentle guy, and you wouldn't know he has like the biggest sense of humor. He's great, and most of these, from my experience anyway, most of these people are just such lovely human beings, and they're not psychotic. They're not gonna eat my face. They're not gonna tag me with a knife. They're just actors. But I think actors who tend to be drawn to horror maybe exorcise, to use that word, their stuff
Yep.
out on film, and then in real life, they're the most gentle, chill people ever. Where on the other side, you hear horror stories about comedians, who are supposed to be happy-go-lucky people, but they're like, from what I'm hear, some of the biggest assholes in the industry. So um, that goes to show you, you never know, and I think that adds to having it be a fun environment if your actors are not divas. They're used to being covered in blood. They're used to screaming. Um, they love the fact that they're doing something primal, and I think that's what makes horror movies so interesting for me. Is that basically they're fun to make, and you could do so much in terms of hiding little metaphors and little things. Oh, this is a satire, but I'm not telling anybody it's a satire, about whatever the political system, but it's about zombies or whatever. Um, and I think that's why there's so much is read into stuff like George Romero's work, because you can layer stuff in and not be overt about it. It's I think it's just magical. I think more magical than, I mean, anything. Fantasy's good too, but a fantasy you have to follow kind of stricter rules. I think with horror could be anything. You could do a horror movie about an old woman in a house. You could do a horror movie about a bus that somehow sunk into the ocean. There's an air pocket, but the sharks outside. It's such a playground of ideas that I mean, I can't imagine wanting to do anything else. Action is something I want to try my hand at, because I love action. But that basically, long story short, I love horror because there you go.
I would love to see an action movie from you. I definitely agree with that. At least in my experience, anybody I've spoken to, whether it be like right now or even afterwards behind the scenes and stuff, uh, nothing but like the most kind, gracious people with their time, with their advice, stuff like that. And I think it's such a weird, like, it's something people probably wouldn't associate with like the horror genre, or the industry would be like, oh, they've all got to be like psychotic lunatics and like really highly strung and like a little bit off, where it
Mhm.
couldn't be further from the truth. And I've heard that actually, not to sound like I'm brown nosing or anything, but I heard that about you multiple times from people, that like you were super
Oh,
chill and like super nice. Everybody had nothing but good things to say about you.
oh,
Um,
good.
as will I now after this. You've been so gracious with your time. Like I said, I would do this for another hour and 30 minutes. So hopefully we can do it again, maybe in the second half of this year. I appreciate the
Sure.
time. For everybody that's either, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, all the links to Jose's stuff will be down below in the description. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Allcast or anywhere like that, all the links will be down below in the description. Like I said, it's been a pleasure. I've had fun. I hope you have too. And I can't wait to chat again.
Thank you, brother. It's been an honor.